A labyrinth prolongs the path, while a maze is for getting lost. And we are lost. So there's this guy, his name is Sam Barlow. You may have heard of him. He did work on 2 spin-offs for Silent Hill in the 2000s, and his role as auteur on a couple of games, most notably an FMV murder mystery known as Her Story, and more recently, Immortality, an arts project of a similar make, definitely catapulted him into the public eye. I'm always open to these types of experiences, so colour me interested when I hear murmurings of a Game of the Year contender recommended by the man himself. When Sam Barlow speaks, you got me paying attention. That game was and is Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, the most recent puzzle experience out of Simogo in Malmö, published by Annapurna Interactive. And to say my expectations were high is an understatement. Simogo has an excellent track record, and Annapurna's publishing tenure is equally as impressive. They published that cat game that only a couple people have heard of. A little bit Twin Peaks, a little bit noir, the art had me hooked, the vibe had me hooked, and its interesting use of not just tropes from puzzlers, but also modern survival horror had me sold, hook, line, and sinker. I see the critical reception practically universally positive, and I'm sure my mind is made up. I am about to experience one of the most unique and thought-provoking video games of the 2020s. I booted up, my body is ready, and from minute 1, the game has this enthralling sense of mystery to it. It's incredibly weird, it's kind of scary, and the puzzles make me feel like I've put my brain in a blender. The first thing the game asks you to do is read a fully fledged instruction manual about its control scheme, containing some important information about certain systems. And the opening puzzles, while not too difficult, definitely don't hold your hand. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes was really shaping up as what I needed it to be. So I keep playing. My brain is on fire. I have my notebook, penning codes and solutions in a language that would look like scratchings on the walls of an insane asylum to anyone but me. And after about 7 or 8 hours, I'm gonna be really honest here, I fucking hated it. Now, those are some strong words for some strong emotions, but I'm gonna come back to that, as Lorelei's final hours are bursting with some of the most inventive challenges I've ever seen in a game of this type, and also has one of the most satisfying conclusions I've seen in a game to date. But it's important to understand that those feelings of disdain that I experienced are real, and they didn't exactly go away after I'd experienced the game's incredible conclusion, and certainly stained my viewpoint on this otherwise novel and engrossing experience. While I may not be as relentlessly positive as a lot of the critical reception would seem to suggest, I'm still coming off of this game recommending it to you, as despite my frustrations with some systems, the controls, and especially some unclear dialogue, there is something magnificent buried underneath it, and that is incredibly evident in the game's final hours. Every single thing that Simogo had been teaching you over the course of the game really coalesces into something quite satisfying. The game is weird, it's captivating, and almost always has you questioning what you think you know. It oozes style, and genuinely has a lot to say about what it means to create art. I'm James Jensen for Reset Button, and this is my review of Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes takes place in a hotel somewhere in Central Europe, and you arrive in your car with nothing to your name but inexplicably good fashion sense, a strange photo of a woman, and a note from an eccentric man penned R. Nero. You're naturally gonna have a lot of questions. Why you're there, the nature of Mr. Nero, what is so significant about this hotel, can I pet the dog? You really walk in knowing nothing, and now it's obviously your job to uncover the mysteries of the hotel, Lester's Lester's jar. Yeah, I'm just going to go with that. On your approach, you'll notice some peculiar things. Security cameras watching your every move, and as you approach the front gate, a dog walks up, hands you a note which tells you about your path forward. I'm going to go through a couple of the opening puzzles just to give you an understanding on exactly how the majority of the basic challenges are structured, as I believe this is definitely a strong point of the experience. If you're really sensitive to spoilers, you should probably subscribe to the channel so you can come back to this review after you've played the game. Gotcha! The game took me roughly 18 hours or so to reach about 96% total completion, so the only real spoilers will just be about structural elements and such. For example, the first group of puzzles that Lorelei will serve to you involve opening the gatehouse, with a 4-digit code on a padlock that seemingly has no solution. As you approach, that beautiful dog I mentioned will pass you an unsigned letter through the fence, stating, "Our mystery starts in previous correspondence. Find the year." Pretty simple, and you've probably already guessed that the answer you're looking for is in that letter I mentioned earlier, until you read it, and it says the year that the letter was sent, and your expected arrival date, January 7th next year. You can probably see where I'm going. Despite being a relatively straightforward problem, you're intuitively learning that nothing will ever be as simple as having the exact answer you're looking for written down on a whiteboard nearby. You're always going to have to derive your conclusion through some sort of logical deduction, and it naturally gets far more complex from here on out. This gradual increase in difficulty is relatively well tuned, but you're going to very quickly come to understand that the game is going to ask a lot from you. A pen and paper is essential, a calculator, and a rough understanding of Roman numerals doesn't hurt either. A lot of this game involves taking knowledge that you've acquired as you explore the hotel, be it through notes or your actual understanding of systems or key plot elements, and having them recontextualized in ways that allow you to complete challenges you once thought next to impossible. Relatively early on, you can come across the final puzzle the game has to offer, though you may not realize it yet. And as it asks you to input an incredibly complex series of codes that look like complete gibberish, you may think to yourself, there is absolutely no fucking way that the game is going to expect me to learn how to solve this. And like 15 hours later, you'll be back. I actually had 4 pages in my notebook just dedicated to this one puzzle. The craziest thing about it is if you have any one part of the code wrong, it'll just kick you out with no information about what you might have missed or misunderstood, forcing you to reevaluate your perceptions of just what it's asking from you. It's drawing on your understandings of its systems during basically the game's whole runtime. It's a huge undertaking, and this single puzzle took me like 2 hours to solve. But man, that feeling of catharsis, the eureka moment when you finally solve it, is hard to match, especially when it comes to what feels like such an incredible feat of brain power. Structurally, the game is almost analogous to something like Resident Evil, where you slowly progress through one large and intricate space, its secrets opening up to you as time goes on, with your ability to unlock shortcuts through more puzzles that will allow for easier backtracking. It's not just the map that invokes this feeling, mind you. It's got these fixed camera angles, you can only save at specific locations, and the overall vibe just feels very survival horror. While this design philosophy is initially quite intriguing, once during my playthrough I ran into an issue specifically pertaining to this method of saving. At a certain point during your sleuthing, you're going to encounter a specific repeating type of puzzle that's actually pretty well designed. You're shown a scene with no context, and your goal is to basically memorize every point of interest, no matter how seemingly inconsequential it may be. Once you're done, you'll be asked one specific question about the scene, along the lines of, how many fingers was this character holding up, or what was next to the clock on the shelf? This is a pretty novel concept, requiring you to carefully consider your surroundings and check in spaces you might not initially expect to look. And it's quite engaging as a puzzle, but there is one fundamental issue here. Failing to answer the question correctly doesn't just kick you out of the puzzle, it actually triggers a game over, sending you back to the last time you saved the game. This is especially problematic as the way you're brought into these puzzle rooms is actually kind of hard to avoid, and on one occasion, I lost almost 2 hours of progress to this system, something uniquely frustrating. One could make the argument that this system is to encourage you to save often or to increase the feeling of risk in these encounters, but as these fail states are so few and far between, it just feels like such an incongruent piece of design, and honestly, I'm left struggling to understand why the game doesn't have some sort of autosave or to just forgo these fail states entirely given its inherently low stakes nature. It's such a baffling decision that makes little sense outside of sticking to conventions of a genre that the game isn't even really a part of. This issue rears its head again in a way that in some ways is more frustrating a little further into the game. I'd learned my lesson about not saving at every possible opportunity by this point, but this fail state presented itself in a rather ugly way yet again, where the game will present you a multitude of quiz questions regarding basically every single piece of information you would have stumbled across thus far. These questions ask for incredibly specific information that could be in basically any document you would have had access to by this point, thankfully accessible through a menu that you can review before being forced to answer. I must highlight the precision that it's demanding of you here. It's not asking for rough estimates. These questions go deep into specifics regarding timelines, obscure sets of information from minigames, basically everything you would have encountered. So imagine my disbelief when one of these questions, what date did you arrive at the hotel, gives me a set of numbers to input my answer. I can put in any number, and after scouring my documents, I find that I arrived on the 7th of January 1963, a number you might recognize from earlier, and here we go down the rabbit hole. I'll reiterate, I can only put numbers in. So my first guess would be 07011963. Wrong, game over. Here in Australia, we put the day before the month, so I think maybe it's using the American date system. 01071963. Wrong, game over. 1963 0107, game over. 0107, game over. 0701, game over. Game over, game over, game over. The answer the game actually wanted from me was the number 7. For a game and a system so hyper-fixated on such specific recall of accurate information, asking you to dig through documents for specific names and dates, this clumsy wording is just unbelievable. The date of arrival, the 7th of January 1963, is not the number 7. I will die on this hill. This is one of only a few examples where its imprecise questioning becomes a problem. But as I said, in a game where the focus is placed squarely on specific details, these imprecise fumbles stick out like a sore thumb. And I'd be lying if I said they didn't really sour my experience, especially given the quality of some of the other puzzles. Onto something a little bit more positive then. The game's presentation is absolutely immaculate. I played this on PC, but it's also available on the Switch. The game is predominantly in black and white, with little flashes of red as an accent, and the vibe is just top-notch here. It really nails the aesthetic that it's going for, that French New Wave film styling, and everything from the visual design to the music speaks to that. The hotel itself feels almost like the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil, and that is no accident. Simogo have this incredible ability to utilize certain motifs, and you'll very quickly start to see patterns emerging, not just in the environment and its color choices, but in the way that certain points of information repeat throughout its many puzzles, however recontextualized in different ways. Sam Barlow has talked about this game for an interview with MD Rodriguez for the New York Times and said, quote, "There's a thesis at play here in the game that is connecting the high and low arts and is going, look, there's actually a huge similarity between the puzzle box mansion of a Resident Evil and an art installation," end quote. And yeah, if you really think about it, a lot of what this game is trying to do is act as some sort of meditation on the nature of what it means to create art. Its characters are more abstractions of people rather than people themselves. It's kind of unclear just what these people are supposed to represent, and there's this meta-narrative involving video games as a medium for artistic delivery. It's a lot. Look, I don't want to go too far into literary analysis here, because that's a lot of the fun in this game, and figuring out its twists and turns is a uniquely rewarding experience. But just know, if you're the kind of person that enjoys picking apart obscure and somewhat art house narratives, you're going to have an absolute ball here. The way it wraps up is incredibly compelling as well, and the last little bits of information are fed to you in such a satisfying way as those puzzle pieces start to fit together in your brain and reveal what you've been working towards all this time. I can't say that it'll work for everyone, as it definitely does lean into a lot of traits of postmodern literature and is quite esoteric as such, but I did really love it by the end. There are definitely some other problems though. The controls, for one, are almost what I would describe as unacceptable, using only the 4 directional inputs and 1 contextually activated button to do basically everything. There's no way of exiting out of menus without scrolling all the way back up to the top to use that 1 input as a back command. It's really weird. And that's the idea. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is definitely a great video game. If you're a fan of puzzlers and art house film, you're almost certainly gonna love this, but to pretend that there aren't some serious problems with certain design elements is a little strange. Some curious word choices in some puzzles also really baffled me, considering the game is so committed to hyper-specific use of language and recall. Some simple changes to more precise language would have made this experience so much less frustrating for me, and I'm just confused as to how these mishaps slip through the cracks when the rest of the experience is so polished. There is no mistaking, however, that despite these frustrations, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is one of the most unique and interesting takes on a puzzler that I've ever played. Its approach involving not just increasingly challenging puzzles, but requiring substantiation that you actually understand the game's systems and the information it's been feeding to you. It's as much about brilliant puzzle design as it is about intellectualizing the abstract concepts and motifs that the game is showing to you, and it really feels quite congruent by its conclusion. It can be relentlessly unforgiving, sometimes unapproachably esoteric, and incredibly strange. It's an experience that demands you meet it where it is, and I can't help but respect Simogo for this uncompromising attitude regarding its difficulty. While I may not feel as relentlessly positive about it as many others, if you're able to rise to its demands, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes will gift you an experience you will not soon forget. Hey guys, welcome back. Nice to see ya. You know, I'm a simple man. I have one simple request. Actually 3. If you could, give the video a like if you liked it. Maybe leave a comment. And maybe subscribe to the channel. All of those things would help me out immensely, and I would really appreciate it. Also, seeing as there is a few more people than last time, If there's anything you guys want to see, let me know. I'll see what I can do. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and thank you so much for watching. See ya.